Been in Kansas City. I'll actually be flying back to Bristol tomorrow, and was just out in the garden shoveling. We're getting beds ready for Michael J. and Jamie's garden for this food garden for this summer, and so that's kind of a fun project to do. And then I get to go home and start on our own garden. So rock and roll with taking care of native species and growing some awesome fresh organic food. And Celinda, I don't know if you're trying to get on, but I'm not seeing your hand up as yet. So we'll give it a second to see. But if not, then we'll move forward. And we've got a comment. Let's say hello. Celinda can't remember what they are. Okay, well, uh, I'm not sure what your comments were, Celinda. So if it wakes up again, then we'll go for it. Otherwise, we'll just rock on with what's happening at this moment. Good to see you, Joe, Cami. Lots of guests on today. Not sure why. If the guests want to be able to fully interact on the show, you need to open the Needle app and click Mind Shifters Radio, and then you'll have full access. You can make comments in the chat room. You can push the call button and talk to us. So if anything's on your mind in that regard, then push the button, say hello, welcome Jose. Hope all's well in your world. Hope things are good in Florida, and rock and roll. So we've got nobody with a hand up, so I'm just going to jump in and pick up. We were talking about the whole idea of codependence and addiction and how that relates to codependence. And I actually had a conversation with Joe the other day, and he made some really cool comments. And I'm going to actually base some of what I have to say on what that comment was. It was really right on track, Joe. I appreciate that. And he told me he had not copyrighted the idea, so I'm going to use it. So thank you. But the next thing in my notes from where we were talking before we got into that worksheet, we were talking about addiction. And along with hostility, most of the world thinks hostility is emotion, pardon me. And my offering is hostility is not an emotion at all. Hostility is a literal chemical addiction, internally produced. And when you realize that it does not fall into the realm of emotions, it's literally an anesthetic. Every time one goes into hostility, if you start noticing you're using an anesthetic, then you can start to bring the conversation back to yourself rather than talk about everybody else. So if you really want to heal and you are in a conflict with someone, what you want to do as you move forward or to move past that conflict is make sure that when you walk away from that conflict, you're having a conversation to yourself about yourself and what's happening in your own mind, if there's some form of hostility or fear. Another thing to add to the list of addictions is vengeance. I think vengeance addiction is another one of the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind. The mind, remember, had what's called the mind of man, the mind of the body, the non-being mind, carbon-based memory, has a cheap copy of everything that's real and true. And the way that works is that in this world of actuality, there are energetic patterns that come into our senses, into our awareness. And those energetic patterns are stored holographically in every cell in the structure, including the sperm and the egg. So were you to conceive a child tomorrow, that child would have in its structure every thought you've ever thought, every feeling you've ever felt, every reality you have ever engaged in, every wondrous skill that you have, and every unresolved issue. And when we refuse to be in relationship with those energies, when we go, no, this is not mine, when we end up in denial, remember our definition of denial, and I can't say this too often, that when you're in denial, you're dissociated from the truth in you. And what's denial? Denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. If I'm in a conflict with someone and I walk away from that conflict with all the things going on in my mind about what they did and what they said and how they're this way and how they're that way, I'm in denial. I'm dissociating from my own trauma or pain. And when I do that, that dissociation makes for me an unnatural state for a human being. And that is, we end up functioning out of an unconscious mind. Now, the unconscious mind is a stranger. And that stranger, and here's Joe's input from the other day. Thank you, Joe. That stranger has a rope attached to the guillotine. It pulls the rope and looks back at its body and says, look what they've done to me. And if you walk away from a situation where you pulled the rope on yourself and you're going, look what they've done to me, and you're feeling something inside of your form, you're living in a dissociated state. You're living in a lie. You're living in a conversation with a stranger. And the rope is made of primarily fear and all of its brothers and sisters and cousins. Grievances are of the mind of man. They do not exist in the actuality. Hostility, vengeance, rage, guilt, grief, drama, trauma, vengeance, they're all ways of pulling the guillotine, the rope, and dropping the guillotine on your own head. Stop. Stop and have a conversation with yourself about what's going on in you. You've got to grow up. You can't keep doing the child game. We were all taught, as early as the age of 4, virtually everybody became a very committed card-carrying member of the one world universal religion of blame. And when they're in upset, their conversation's all about somebody else. That's called codependence. What is a codependent? A codependent is someone that I either think or speak as though they're the cause of what's moving inside of me. And this codependent dynamic involves, or at its root, is the power person dynamic. And unfortunately, whatever the power person did, remember there are 3 things that go into creating a power person dynamic in the mind. And usually this is an interaction between a parent and a child, though not always. It can involve anyone else. But when these 3 conditions are met, a power person dynamic is instilled in the mind. And until that power person dynamic is faced and forgiven, there are only 3 behaviors possible for the person who has that power person dynamic in their mind. And that, I would offer, is virtually everybody in the world. As far as I know, this idea has never appeared on planet Earth before until this work. And here's how it works. When this power person has more power over you than you do, they're not functioning as a human being, not functioning as love, and you perceived their action as having more power over you than you had over yourself, then, and again, it's usually a child, the energy field opens wide and one absorbs everything. Energetically, it's going on in the environment. Every energy emanating from the mind of the power person. The power person may do this with a smile on their face, but underneath it, they're grinding their teeth and there's rage. And if you are the object of that power person dynamic, then all of that rage is literally sensed and absorbed into your structure. In the future, depending on the level of stress you're under, there will only be 3 behaviors possible for you to do. Because your life will be one of, why is this happening to me again? And the 3 behaviors depend on the level of stress you're under, i.e., which one is active, which behavior the automatic decision system in the mind brings forward. When there's little or no stress, I just invite you to look at how this works in your life. You'll notice that you do whatever you did to get along with your power person. That's just your modus operandi. They call that people's normal personality. And remember, the word personality comes from the Greek word persona, which means a mask. It's not who we are, but it's who we've been taught to believe we are. That's the self that Yeshua said, in order for you, being, love, the true essence of who you are to live, that self has to die. That non-being, fantasy in the mind, product of carbon-based memory and perception, needs to be removed. So when there's little or no stress, one will do whatever they did to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, the automatic decision system will kick over into the second level of the power person dynamic, and one will do whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. And then, without fail, when ultra stressed, a person will do whatever their power person did to them that they hated the most. And it doesn't matter how many times they say to themselves, I will never do that behavior again, until they go into the root. Carl Jung said it very well. He said, until the unconscious is made conscious, it will direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. It literally is so integrated into the persona that when that persona is activated by stress, it takes over and runs the show. And what happens is this non-being self, which is literally energetically a product of the power person dynamic, one thinks if they can successfully pull off the power person dynamic and deliver the blow that their power person delivered to them, to whoever their object of attention is right now, that persona will define that as success, goal achieved. And that, unfortunately, brings one to a high, because in that state, there's a hit of dopamine. That's why people can get addicted to negative behavior, because dopamine is the happy powder. We're not searching for, we're searching for joy. Let go of happiness. Happiness is a false game that's played by a chemical addiction to dopamine. That's not the interest of this work. So one gets a hit of dopamine and goes, oh, look at that, I've achieved it, I've become my power person. And to them, the power person was God. Again, it's usually a parent, so it's their God. And so now in their mind, in that twisted codependent dynamic, all of a sudden, if I can deliver that blow to this other person, all of a sudden I become God. And that is the addiction to dopamine. But the truth is, the unconscious impact of that dynamic is the underlying resonance of the pain that was delivered in relationship to the power person. And it is a disease. The overriding dopamine hit is a totally fake high. It will never produce what you want. A behavior based in hostility or fear. I've had conversation with people who defend and they want their hostility. No, my rage is good for me. Look, I took action. It got me up off the couch and it made me take action. And look what happened. Yeah, okay, let's look what happened. Have you ever done anything you regret in your life? Look back over your life and identify, if you would, every time. It might be good to sit down with a pen and paper and make a list of every time that you've done something you regret. And at least 99.9999% of the time, behind that regret will be hostility, an addiction, a drug. And there are many drugs in our culture. Whenever one is working in the drug state, alcohol, pot, all of those drugs, they're living in an hallucination. They're living in, because that's an addictive substance, because those substances shut down data. People say, well, but I'm happy then. Well, okay, but notice that you're happy because there's a chemical that your mind is using. And when it comes to alcohol, excuse me, people say we get together to have fun at a party. Well, I challenge you to go look at the party and watch the growing discontent, the growing hostility, the staggering that happens when that addiction occurs. And watch the kinds of raging fights that happen. And don't tell me you're happy and having fun. That's just a total fraud. So if one is willing to live in a mind that is free of addictions, then that mind, if they've lived in a world of the fantasy called perception, if you do enough work and collapse your perceptions, get to the root of the pain and disappear the root of the pain, then you'll get to the point where your physiology and your perception will work fueled by and functioning out of love rather than fueled by the brothers and sisters of hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, or the brothers and sisters, pardon me, of fear, hostility, rage, guilt, grief, etc. So that power person being the God, the non-being mind thinks it successfully displaced God. And now they have the satisfaction of sitting on the throne. And if that is reinforced, if everybody kowtows, we're seeing the impact of that, in the public sphere today. The people who are out there raging, and when people kowtow them, it's like success. Now we're going to go for the next one, and they just are plummeting into the depths of depravity and insanity. So if that's reinforced, then it creates the next round of blame toward whoever in the world is going to do it to them again. That's why, if you're in a conflict, you want to walk away from that conflict having a conversation about yourself. And I think one of the most important steps you can take if there's hostility is to recognize that the perceptions based in hostility or fear constitute a mental illness. That's why people do what they regret when they're in hostility and fear. Well, but Michael, look, I took this action and look, it turned out pretty good. Yeah, well, yeah, it destroyed my family and I haven't seen my kids in 10 years, but it worked out pretty good. In my rage, I took action and I got that divorce and I got that lawyer yeah, but what happened to your life? Now, I agree. Rage, hostility in all of its forms can be a motivator to action. But notice the action being taken is a mind disconnected from love, and it will always do something it regrets. If hostility is motivating you, if hostility is fueling your mind at any given moment, and if your conversation about somebody else is hostility toward them, then recognize that your unconscious dynamics are being used, your power person dynamics are being used literally to formulate the projection, the picture in your mind that you think is them, the picture painted on the inside of your eyeballs. And because that's your object of attention, oh, it really does look like them. But the picture painted on your inside of your eyeballs and the tension and the trauma going on in physiology is about what you've not resolved in your life. So the satisfaction of delivering to others what one's power person unleashed on them feels like power, but it is clearly self-destruction. Only energies delivered through love to self or others will uplift our lives, period. Everything else leads to disintegration. So, a lot of people get into the big conversation, the big argument about this fact or that fact or this fantasy or this alternative fact and that alternative fact, and try to figure it out. The number one pseudo-solution of the non-being mind is, if I could just figure this out. Stop it. Admit you have a mental illness if there's hostility or fear moving in you. Shut your mouth. Stop taking action toward others. Have a conversation about yourself. Go inside yourself and clean up your own mind. Now, there's a presumption by the mind, by this mind of man, carbon-based memory, that whenever a power person thought, whenever the disorder that was formed, whenever the message was delivered by the power person, which ends up being a thought disorder, and it's usually something about how you're broken. They're the early thought disorders that the power person feeds to the child. Then, of course, what is the projection? If I use that unconscious, unresolved dynamic in me to formulate my brain's image of someone else, then that thought disorder that was delivered to me by my power person and accepted, I was a child and didn't know any better, I believe that thought disorder is true about somebody else. And you will speak these thoughts with what appears to be your own voice, but it's actually your power person. And when you approach it from that direction, then you will be able to move into the generational patterns in carbon-based memory that are based in hostility and fear, and free yourself from it. So the lie will be so deep that you'll believe that what's going on inside of you, what is producing your feelings and what is producing your perception are coming from or the fault of someone else. And that's why is this happening to me again? And the mind that's in denial, the mind that thinks or speaks as though something outside of it is the cause of what's moving inside of it, is impervious to correction. You've got it, and you can't figure out the solution. But that's the number one, again, pseudo-solution of the non-being mind. But what you can do in the moment is you can apply forgiveness and collapse that perception. You can collapse that product of carbon-based memory, that lie. Now, your mind will believe that whatever's moving you, because the mind converts thoughts into pictures, and you see the picture of that thought being true about them, but that's a lie produced by carbon-based memory. And all of this is done, recognize there's a positive purpose to this. All of this is done in the unconscious effort to resolve the lie your power person told you about yourself. Just breathe on that for a minute. All of this projection, all of this crazy conflict is the effort of two people trying to resolve the lie that the power person delivered and to try to prove that it's not true about you. And you know what? It's not true about you. But you're not going to prove that by projecting into your brain's image someone else. And the power person, when they delivered that message, was just passing on the family tradition. You remember that scripture quote says, "Look to the lives of the fathers, for ours are but a shadow of theirs upon the earth. The sins of the fathers will be passed, yea, unto 3 and 4 generations of those who hate me." When one is in an addicted state, the root of perception is fear. And hate in that particular passage is not hate as in a love-hate relationship. It's hate as in separated from me. So what happens? The thought disorders from one generation to the next are passed on through perception. Recognize that everything that perception shows you is a lie. Remember that lesson in the course. If you haven't watched it, if this is making sense and you want to take it to the next level, jump on our YouTube channel. Just go to whyagain.org. And over on the right-hand side, there's a link to our YouTube channel. Click there. Go down the list and find the video, What is the World? How do I forgive? That lesson in the course is probably one of the most powerful, one of the most important, and one of the most misunderstood lessons in the course. And even if you've watched that before, I suggest going back and watching again. I watched it again a few weeks ago, and it was like, oh my God, I realized I understood that back then. And that's a free 30-minute or so video. We do also have a DVD in our catalog, which is a 2-hour presentation on that. But that lesson, what is the world? The world is false perception. Everything that comes from carbon-based memory, everything that forms pictures in your mind that you say, look, this is what's happening now, came from the content of carbon-based memory. If it came from the content of carbon-based memory, then it had to be in carbon-based memory before it could be presented to us. If it had to be in card-based memory before it could be presented to us, it had to be from the past. And you think this is a present moment experience when you're in that state. So everything that comes from carbon-based memory, everything that is in perception is a lie because it came from perception, and under stress, it becomes part of the perceptions that are presented by your mind. The past massaged into looking like the present. And the objective of this work is to put an end to the past. So Cammie's saying, let's see what Cammie's got to say. Nice comment, Cammie. Yes, I agree. Rage and hostility in all its forms can be a motivator to action, but notice the action being taken is mind disconnected from, I think there's a typo there. Not sure what it is, but I'll throw in disconnect from truth, but it will always fall. I think that's failed to do something. If regrets, if hostility is motivating, you possibly is fueled by your mind and given a moment in the case. Your conversation about somebody else is hostility toward them. You're right on there, Cammie. That's it. And it appears to be hostility toward someone else. It's hostility toward a picture in your mind, but the picture in your mind is from your own content. So it's really hostility toward self. It's a way of anesthetizing whatever it is that I don't want to feel, whatever it is I'm not willing to look at. And that's where, you know, you can't figure it out, but you can forgive it at any instant. You can cancel the goal driving the perception at that moment, collapse that perception, and that's what gives you consistent, persistent access to your unconscious mind. And if you're the early adopter of this work, then you've got generations and generations that need to be cleaned up. So recognize that your unconscious dynamics are being used to power person dynamics are literally used to formulate the projection. That's it exactly. The picture in your mind that you think is then a picture you can paint on the inside of your eyeballs. And because that's your opportunity, tension occurs. Oh, it really does look like them. Yes, absolutely. But the picture painted on the inside of your eyeballs and the tension and the trauma, wing it on physiology. Yeah, it's literally physiologically a disease process. And that's why, when we did the quantum still point, we didn't just jump right in and go to the core. What did we do? There's a whole training session for letting go of the resistance in physiology. Because when one's in resistance, literally in the Aramaic sense, the word Satan means the resistor, one who misleads. And when one's holding their breath and tissues locked up, they're literally in a resistant state, which stops the flow of energy. And most of the culture lives in the Aramaic sense, literally trapped in Satan. And that's why the first part of the quantum still point is a training in noticing where the tensions are, noticing the resistance, breathing into it, use the breath to go there, and softening and opening that resistance. I'm just catching back up with my note. My it skipped out on me, and I had to get back to it. It does really look like them. And this next sentence you've written, Cami, is just exactly it. It's about what you've not resolved in your life. So the satisfaction of delivering to others what one's power person unleashed on them. It feels like power, but is clearly self-destruction. Only energy delivered through love. Roll up with our eyes. Everything else leads to disintegration. So, a lot of people get into the big conversation, the big argument about this fact of the factor. This train is not sure exactly. I think there's a typo in here. Trying to figure it out. Yep. The number one solution of the non-being mind. And you'll never figure it out. But time after time, and when you first really start tapping into it, or when you're really in the stress is up and the chips are down, you might have to use that forgiveness tool 10 times a minute. So stop, take a breath, move on, shut your mouth, stop taking action toward others. Exactly. Have a conversation about yourself. Go inside yourself. Clean up your own mind. Yeah, the message is delivered. It's such a key to recognize what kind of messages. We've actually got a chart, the physiological effects of emotional suppression. I'll ask Jeannie to maybe put it in the notes, a link to it. And it starts out with the kinds of thought disorders, and literally in the naturopathic tradition at least, where those thought energies, where those disintegrative energies are stored on a tissue level throughout the endocrine system and begin the shutdown of the endocrine system literally to death. And that the forgiveness, if one is buying into that thought disorder and building a life based on the thought disorder, which is usually a generational pattern passed on as a family tradition, then if one builds a life based on that, then the next thought disorder, the first one, it'll start to shut down one part of the endocrine system, the next, until death occurs. And the objective, and if you print off that chart, again, we'll get Jeannie to put a link in the notes. If you print off that chart, then you'll see that on one side, there's an arrow going downward, and the way that the thought disorders usually progress, and there's samples of it, not that it's anything absolute, but the general thought disorders that are located in what organs. And then you look on the other side of the chart and you start to move upward. In one case, you've got aging, suffering, and disease. In the other case, you've got healing. If I use right on track, if I use that unresolved, unconscious dynamic, my brain will produce that hostility or fear. Oh, okay, so it's actually recording. Okay, I thought you were trying to just repeat it back, but okay, well that's interesting. But that was a good review, so thank you for that, and extending love in your direction, and appreciation to everybody who is here and listening. Hope that's making sense, and if there's anything we can do to support you, put it in the chat, in the comments, or hit the call button. We've got 25 minutes left, or thereabouts, a little less than 25 minutes. So if there's anything we can support you with, we've got a caller. Great. Miss Susan, welcome, young lady. How are you? Your mic is open,
Hi.
Susan.
Hello, Michael.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, you're loud and
Good.
clear.
Quick question.
Yes.
uh, the title of your book is so useful. Why is this happening to me again? However, I have had, the experience of our friend Michael living in our basement with a terrible outcome. And yet I had one other person who stayed with us with a hard outcome too. She ended up resenting us because after 6 weeks, we found her a place and helped her move out, but she felt rejected and so forth. But now we have these present people who, I hope it doesn't end up that way. It's been going really well. And I'm thinking, am I doing something to invite, we are having people who are non-family members living with us occasionally. And
Right.
we've done that all our Tim's and my married life, remembering back one disaster or another. And all of them back in New Haven were wonderful outcomes. So I'm trying to think if I'm in a game here on some level, or whether there can just be plain old bad luck, and how I react is the ticket rather than what they do or don't do. And I must say, the tools have been just so helpful with the Michael situation because the attacks continue, um, and they're pretty ugly. And he finds ways of communicating, even though we've blocked him,
Keep it going. Yeah.
to keep it going. And he is miserable. He's frightened. He's unhealthy. He's angry. And I feel as if I'm a witness to something that I can't do anything about except wish him well. And sometimes I don't feel very pleasant about that, but I'm practicing.
Right.
But I'm
The
wondering
gentle
where
art
the,
of blessing.
right. So I'm just wondering where the why is this happening to me again thing, whether or where it's applicable. I mean, I know when people set themselves up and they invite people who are not known to them, they're opening themselves to circumstances that might not be ideal. But anyway, I'm smelling a small rat here. Like, why didn't I mean, way back when we invited him in for 2 weeks because in 2 weeks, a tiny house that my son had built for himself in a distant medical practice thing, the practice thing fell through, and suddenly he had this little house. So he offered it to Michael for $300 a month, payable when he could. And Michael said, "Oh, okay." Um, so in 2 weeks, we got the land ready where it was going to be hauled up. It was northern Pennsylvania, about an hour away.
Right.
And Michael knew the day was coming, but on that day, he was packing his car and crying. And I said, "What?" And he said, "I can't do that house. I can't do that house. It's too small. I have this little dog." And there's reasons, good reasons, but he hadn't told us. Well, probably a normal person would have said, you really weren't honest with us. So I'm going to have you go, and I'm sorry. But instead, we invited him back in. 2 years later, we finally find a place for him. But maybe that's one of the why is this happening? That the boundaries were mushy, or my wish to be a good guy, overrode self-protection. I don't know. I'm just thinking about all this as we're barraged with this, and my church too. I mean, it's comforting to know that somebody as sweet and wonderful as our new rector could be attacked by this person for made up, we call ourselves Christians. Well, I think we're pretty good ones because we don't judge a lot of people. We try to just live it and be very open and so
Right.
forth.
Right.
So, anyway, Michael, I'm going on and on. I'll stop. And if you want to make a comment somewhere about something along the line, that would be great.
Well, what my thought is what I need to be responsible for is what moves in me. If I see that letter and I go into fear or self-deprecation or
Uh huh.
pain or trauma of some kind,
Uh huh.
then that's my work to do. Otherwise, I stay connected to a state of love. I stay connected to being, or perhaps this is the opportunity to take my practice to the next level of staying connected to being and extend love in his direction and let him do what he wants to do. Another part of codependence is trying to be responsible for somebody else's trauma,
Mm-hmm.
which, nobody can do.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's another piece of work to do in the direction, and there's a little bit of a tingle in there of maybe some of what you shared about your sister and
Yeah.
her living circumstances and how you kind of got hooked in there. And
Yeah.
so I do a couple of worksheets about what's moving, what's coming up at this point around Michael. Is he showing you something that is your next refinement? Is your next I know you've done mega work around it, but are there still some little pieces hanging around that you could clean up.
I'm sure there are. And when you say holding a space of love and wishing him well, I have to go through wanting to throttle the heck out of him first. So I,
Okay, so that's okay. So what did it feel like? This is a question to ask you. What did it feel like when your power person throttled you?
not good.
That's what your forgiveness work is then.
Can you sort of say more, because shaping that is not available in my brain cells right now.
Well, when an inclination comes up in me,
Yeah.
it comes up from an energy that's in me.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
I had never been throttled, if I didn't have the brain cells for being throttled,
Yeah.
there would be nothing in me that would want to reach out and do that.
Yeah.
If I have the brain cells for that and there's still some pain or trauma in me
Mm-hmm.
about that, then literally, energetically, that sets up an energy field that's going to tend to pull that out of somebody. Somebody's going to play it out with me. And when so I'd suggest maybe a worksheet where Michael is the object of attention and I want to throttle him.
Yeah.
And what's my goal?
To kill
What
him,
is
of
it you
course.
want from Michael? Well,
Yeah.
that's the goal you want to do to Michael in that state. And that's what you want to resolve. You want to free your physiology of that.
Yeah.
And then, but what is the goal you hold for Michael? What is it? If you could write the ideal circumstance and the ideal outcome of the next letter that you get from Michael, what would it be?
Oh, of course it would be. You know what? I've been writing to you. I've been writing these letters. I've been blaming you, and I'm so sorry. You tried to help me, and your motives were good, and I'm really sorry I treated you that way. I will not do that. I am scared. I'm terrified, but hating on you is not the answer. Something like that.
Okay. So then what I hear the goal is that you'd like to have him acknowledge that you're innocent. Is that a goal you had for your power person? What if in your early childhood, your mother had seen you always as innocent and treated you that way?
That would have
How
been.
different would your life be today?
Mm.
How different would it have been then? And what's
Yeah.
happening with your breath right now?
Well, my brain has gone in two directions. My breath, I don't know what it's doing. Part of me says, but you're not innocent. You're a bad girl.
Mm,
Nothing you
right.
do is pure. And I do think that's true. You even talk about divine selfishness. Well, I'm aware of the selfishness too. I wanted to
Actually, I
be a.
don't think you've ever heard me talk about divine selfishness. You've heard me talk about being self-wise.
No, you had
Self-wise
a
is not
phrase.
selfish. Say again?
You had a phrase. Maybe I misremembered it. It had divine in it, I think.
Not sure. But in any event, I do worksheets around wanting him to see you as innocent.
Mm-hmm.
When you finish step one, that little box over on the right where you put the
Yeah.
initials of everybody you've ever wanted that from,
Oh, yeah.
I'd expand that out into a separate sheet of paper
Mm-hmm.
and I'd literally spend time and write down the name of every person in your life right from the very beginning that you wish they had seen you and treated you as though you were innocent.
Yeah, that list is forming as we speak.
And it's long. You know why it's long? Because that's a power person dynamic. That's a message you got from your power person
Mm.
that's integrated into your own persona. And remember, that's your own mask. That's who you've been trained to think you are. That's the self that Yeshua says, in order for you to live, you've got to die. And so when you start working on canceling your need for Michael to see you as innocent, and maybe the corollary to that would be to appreciate you, to say thank you. Each of those would be worksheets to be done, and then go back through with mom and with every person on that list. And what you'll be doing is you'll be dissolving the self that isn't.
Whoa.
And that's going to change your life on the next level. It's like, my take is you're ready for that piece of work. And I offer that from a point of view of when I hear and see what you do and how you reach out and the kind of support you give the world. My take is that you're one of the most innocent and generous people that I know. That you really, truly do care for people, and you really do put yourself out for them, and really, truly do offer support on a level that few people do. And I think you need to start to acknowledge yourself for that.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. And I must say, having had wake-up sheets and mind shifters to get the thought disorders back on track has been really helpful.
So I'd offer that's your next piece of work. And then do a turnaround.
Okay.
And the turnaround is going to look like, now start doing worksheets on all the people in your life who you have thought were not innocent.
Oh,
who
yeah.
you thought were guilty of something.
Mm-hmm.
And start freeing, again, those energetic patterns projected into your brain's image of others are
Mm-hmm.
from your carbon-based memory, but they also form a part of the self that isn't
That's
in you.
Mm.
And when you see through the eyes of the self that isn't, your power person's thought disorders come out of your mouth as though they're coming from your voice, but the truth is it's your power person's
Mm-hmm.
voice that's speaking. And it's a family tradition. It's been going on for thousands of years on the planet.
Right.
And it's the whole thing. It's time, and only a person who is willing to do the levels of work that you've done can keep climbing that ladder to the next subtle level of work. And I'd offer that's where your next piece of work is. That would be my take.
One of the most amazing things about the life of Jesus, as I understand it, is that his parents knew he was at least special in whatever way they understood. So when he did things like run away and go talk to the sages or the priests in the temple, they didn't, my assumption is they didn't punish him because they knew, they trusted him to be full of integrity, to be a good kid. And those stories.
Wouldn't it have been nice if your power person had offered you that? If you could have been seen through those eyes?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been nice for all of us
That's
if that's
it.
how our power person saw us?
That's it.
Even if we were in our foibles.
Yeah.
And that's what human life does for other people. For me, a great example of that is, here's Yeshua. He sheds blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. He did a major piece of his own work, and shedding blood would be what, from a naturopathic, from my medical training, would be exactly what a mega major healing crisis would look like. Literally, the eliminative systems would open, and that sweating of blood would be the detox. He walks out of the garden, totally connected.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Peter hacking off the ear of the high priest servant. Now, Yeshua has proven how intuitive he is. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows exactly what's coming.
Yeah.
And this is what, in the world's sense, would be the arch enemy, the high priest servant.
Yeah.
Yeshua dresses Peter down and offers him a message that if only the world could hear this, if you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. He's talking about the power person dynamic. He's talking about codependence.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you lash out with, it's not based in love, is literally self-destruction, although it looks like it's being aimed at someone else. And then he turns to what the world would call the archenemy, the man who's going to have him mercilessly slaughtered, and he treats him like a human being
Yeah.
from a space of love.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what if every one of us, that's what our parents always did to us
Mm-hmm.
when we were in error or we
Yeah.
were off the mark? What if each of our parents had had enough awareness that
Mm.
that was the real message that Yeshua was offering there?
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
And that, and you heard me say this before, but it fits in the conversation. I've had people who say, well, that's an interesting interpretation of what Yeshua did, but did you notice that got him dead? And it's like, yeah, I noticed that got him dead. Did you notice they couldn't keep him that way?
Yeah.
The people who haven't resolved, the people in churchianity who haven't resolved their own power person dynamics, go away from that, reading that story, and go, see, suffering, the cross, blood, that's what's going to get it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Those who are connected to love go, oh, he isn't demonstrating the power of suffering. He's demonstrating the power of living, of maintaining your human life. He's demonstrating the power of maintaining Rahma, the gateway in the frontal lobes of the brain that brings love, our created essence, into our human form and allows us to reach out to, in this case, what would be the archenemy. And guess what? They couldn't keep him dead.
Yeah.
And, if our power persons had known that and lived that with us, guess what? They'd still be around
Yeah.
because we're not designed to die. That would be my offering.
And they wanted that. I think both my parents made mistakes, but they wanted that. But they
Yes.
too were in such thrall with the patterns of their culture and the patterns in their families down the generations, just like what you said. They literally couldn't help it. They didn't have any freedom to make that choice.
Well, unfortunately, close to 2,000 years ago, the tools for achieving that were dissolved, were disappeared. The Greeks took it over and it was turned exactly backward.
Mm.
And literally, as one of the opening pages in my book says, life without tools is hell.
Yeah.
I mean, what people go through without the tools. And sadly, many of the tools have been lost. And and the primary core of it is the power person dynamic. Until one goes into their own physiology and is able to resolve that. And, as far as I know, in the last 2,000 years, that has been unknown.
Uh-huh.
And then this brilliant mind 2,000 years ago that says, here's how you collapse perceptions based in the past. Here's how you collapse into that self that's made of those power person messages and those power person dynamics. Here's how you collapse into them, deliver love to those very energetic patterns within yourself and dissolve them, free yourself from them. That's how forgiveness works. But the Greeks took it and turned it all backward, and now I'm supposed to forgive you for what's going on inside of me.
I thought you were going to say, and now I'm supposed to correct it all. I'm Michael Ryce with my book, which you're doing. You're trying to do it. Oh, man.
The goal is to make it available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And, whatever it takes, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, and to get down to the gut level, how do you do this? And, there's nowhere on the planet that I know the tools have appeared in 2,000 years. And he knew it 2,000 years ago, gave it to us.
Mm-hmm.
And the Greeks bastardized it and turned it backward. So there are the worksheets I'd suggest you start on, and it'd be fun to, if you start working with that, to report back to us what you discover, what is uncovered as you do
Okay.
those particular worksheets.
All right, Michael. I know you're at the end of the hour.
All right. Well, much appreciation for you and for everybody who's joined us. I hope you all have the best year yet of your eternal life. If this show made sense, make sure to look it up on our YouTube channel. Where I don't know how many we're up to. Jeannie may be able to tell us, but probably I don't know 15 or 1600 shows now are on our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and type in Michael Ryce, Michaelryce, you'll find us. And pass the link on. Any particular show that's really fitting for you, please send that link to somebody else. Pass it around the world. Now we have the blessing of this awesome app, the Needle app, where we can talk to anybody in the world. They don't need to have a phone number to call into the United States anymore. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah,
So
that is cool.
please pass it on. And thanks for joining us. And have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Thank you, Susan. Blessings.